There has been a little back and forth between you and Bush political guru Karl Rove, and I believe Rove had the last word, so I want to give you an opportunity to respond. He strongly disputes a passage in your book in which you say that he was upset when you were running for Attorney General in Texas. You met with George H.W. Bush, President Bush, 41, and he gave you a campaign contribution. You were not expecting it. And you say that Rove was upset about that and that Rove suggested that President Bush, 41, quote, was too old to have good judgment anymore. Now, over the weekend, Rove wrote on Medium, and he said your account is wrong, starting with the implication that he would question the judgment of one of the finest men that he had ever known, whom he has revered. So he's saying that what you're saying is just not true.
Well, let me back up and tell the full story. So in 2009, I launched a campaign for Attorney General to succeed my boss, Greg Abbott, who was then planning to run for higher office. And in the summer of 2009, I was friends with George P. Bush, which is Bush 41's grandson. And George P. very kindly arranged for me to go up to Kennebunkport and meet with his grandfather. And I went up there. I was amazed to have the opportunity. I went up there and decided I wasn't going to ask for anything other than simply his advice. And so I went and visited with him. He was incredibly gracious, incredibly kind. He ended up asking me, after about 20, 30 minutes, he said, "When's your plane? Can you stick around a little longer?" I said, "Mr. President, my plane's in 2 hours, but I can stay as long as you like. Planes are easy to change."
Right.
And he said, "Well, would you like to go out on the boat with Barbara and me?" I said, "I'd be honored." I was wearing a suit and tie. He looks at me and says, "Well, that's not going to do." And he drives me in a golf cart to his residence, takes me into the closet, gives me jeans and a shirt and a belt with a buckle that says President of the United States, which was utterly surreal.
Yeah.
I go out on the boat with him, and he was in his 80s, and he was driving that boat full speed like he was still an 18-year-old fighter pilot. Barbara Bush is in the front of the boat with rain pelting her, as happy as can be. It was an unbelievable afternoon. I spent 4.5 hours there, and at the end of it, when I was leaving, President Bush, 41, reached in his pocket. He pulled out a check for $1,000 made out to our Attorney General campaign from George and Barbara Bush. I am rarely speechless. I was truly at a loss for words. When I left, I called my wife, Heidi. I said, "I just had the most magical day. You will not believe. This was incredible." Well, a couple days later, Heidi and I were in the Denver airport. I get a call on my cell phone from Karl Rove. I've known Karl a long, long time. Karl is yelling and screaming and cursing. Why the blankety blank did I get a check from Bush 41? And he was very, very upset. And I said, "Well, Karl, look, I'm just doing what you suggested." He had given me advice that for the Attorney General race, I should systematically seek out support. And he said, "But yes, but I'm raising money for the George W. Bush Library, and there are a bunch of big donors in Dallas who are writing 7- and 8-figure checks who are supporting another guy who wants to run for Attorney General, and they're ticked off that the Bush family is supporting someone who's not their guy." And he is yelling at me, and I said, "Okay, Karl, what would you like me to do?" And he says, "Return the check." I said, "Well, Karl, I can't do that. We've deposited it already. Under the Texas ethics laws, I have to report it." He said, "Fine. Then do nothing to draw attention to it. And if you do," this is when he brought out the hammer, he basically threatened me that Bush 43 would come out and endorse my opponent. Now, I never knew if Karl had the authority to make those threats, but I certainly didn't want that to happen. I said, "Karl, listen, I got my start working for you, working for President Bush 43. I'll do what you want." Hours later, we got word back from President Bush 41 that he had approved an endorsement statement that was incredibly kind, incredibly generous. I told my team, throw that statement in the trash. Now, during the time that I was talking to Karl, when I said I went out and sought Bush 41's support, he said, "Well, I didn't know you were going to get 41, and that's when he said that Bush 41 was too old to have good judgment. And actually, I'll be honest, Jake, he used a lot more colorful language than that.
What did he say?
That I omitted from the book because it was hurtful, and I don't want to include what he actually said.
All right.
But when I recounted
but
story...
Bush 41 to you was as with it as when he was 18.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had the Green Revolution was happening in Iran right then. We had an incredible conversation. He was insightful. He had strong judgment. I was in awe of having the opportunity to spend that time with him. And Karl's characterization made me angry. I'll tell you, when I hung up the phone, my wife Heidi was the maddest I saw her in the whole campaign. And she said, "Damn it, this is what's wrong with the Republican Party. the nominee for Attorney General shouldn't depend on who the donors are to the Bush campaign. Well, fast forward to yesterday. Karl issued a statement flatly denying that account, and indeed he said he wasn't raising money for the Bush Library. It never had anything to do with any state rep in Dallas, and the entire thing was made up. Well, you missed the final step of this, which is last night I released a series of emails where I sent, number one, an email to 41's assistant saying because Karl and 43 had asked me to, we were not going to release the endorsement of the President of the United States in an Attorney General race, which was a big deal. But number two, a detailed email I sent Karl, and then his response where he says in writing that this was because donors giving big bucks to the Bush Library were mad that the Bush family was supporting someone not their guy. You know, I'm sorry to say I like and respect Karl, but his statement last night was a flat-out falsehood, and his own email that he signed proves what he said was flat-out wrong.